If your conditioning and your gas tank sucks, this is holding you back from getting better at Jiu-Jitsu. If you don't know me, my name is Kieren and I've helped thousands of grapplers around the world get strong, reduce their risk of injury, and improve their performance on the mats. In this episode, I'm going to give you a tactical guide that you can follow to build an unstoppable gas tank for Jiu-Jitsu. There's a massive difference between improving your fitness versus improving your performance for Jiu-Jitsu. Last year, I moved to Sweden. I lived in Sweden for about 12 months. When I made that move, I went from training around 6 to up to 10 Jiu-Jitsu sessions per week down to a maximum of 2. In this time, I experienced a huge reduction in my performance on the mats. Not only was my gas tank shot, but my strength, my muscular endurance, everything went down the toilet. This reality really slapped me in the face when I went to compete in Sweden. After my first match of the day, I was completely gassed out. I hadn't felt that way since I was a white belt. In contrast to that, I competed just before I left. I competed in Sydney before I moved to Sweden, and I competed in 12 matches in the day, all 3 divisions. I ended up taking out all 3. And I didn't feel gassed at all. Like, yes, I was tired, but I wasn't at the state where I felt like I physically couldn't continue training, sparring, or rolling. Was the difference that my cardiovascular fitness reduced because I wasn't rolling as much? But the interesting thing, I have my VO2 Max data from when I was in Sweden, and there was no change. Meaning I could prove that my VO2 Max or my fitness hadn't reduced. However, my performance and my gas tank definitely had. Why is this the case? Real quick, if you train Jiu-Jitsu and you're serious about improving your performance on the mats and you're reducing your risk of injuries, then you need to try my program quiz. It's a quiz that takes you through your current fitness level, assesses your goals, and then recommends the best training program for you. It's completely free, no sign up required. Link is in the description. Back to the episode. VO2 Max is the gold standard measurement for how physically fit someone is. It's a number that tells you your maximum oxygen uptake when you're doing exercise. However, it's not an indicator of performance, especially grappling performance. Research on Jiu-Jitsu athletes shows that in a 6-minute roll at a competition level of sparring, meaning hard sparring, your average heart rate will be around 85% of your maximum heart rate for that duration of the 6-minute round. Interestingly enough, this heart rate data suggests that if we were to measure your VO2 max, we should see improvements. The reason for that is the standard VO2 max improvement exercise modalities, if you will, is training at least 85 to 95% of your maximum heart rate for 3 to 8 minutes. That is what is used as a protocol to improve someone's VO2 max. And remember, VO2 max is an indicator of physical fitness. Now, based on this data, you may draw the assumption that Jiu-Jitsu sparring improves your VO2 max. Therefore, the best way to improve your cardio for Jiu-Jitsu is to train more Jiu-Jitsu. But you'd be wrong. Because when they've taken the same athletes where they measured their heart rate data, 85% in a 6-minute round, and they measured their VO2 max, what they found was surprising. Their VO2 max was quite low. This means that despite what the heart rate data suggests, hard jiu-jitsu sparring does not improve your VO2 max. So what's the go? Why is there a conflict in what the heart rate suggests versus the reality? To answer this question, I want to lean on Carsten Overdijk, who is a Norwegian PhD candidate and a researcher that has done a lot of investigation into Jiu-Jitsu specific strength and conditioning, and specifically here we're talking VO2 max. What he suggests is Jiu-Jitsu may have an imposed ceiling effect, meaning a cap on the VO2 max improvements it can give you. And there's a few different reasons why he suggests this. First of all, the stop-start nature of BJJ sparring. Jiu-Jitsu isn't like a VO2 max interval. If you were to do VO2 max intervals, you're basically running at 95% maximum effort for around 3 to 8 minutes, depending on your fitness level. However, if you're doing Jiu-Jitsu sparring, it's not consistent effort. It's stop-start. There's a lot of stalling. There's a lot of tactical pauses. The next is the high volume but low intensity. With Jiu-Jitsu sparring, again, if you think back to your last roll, it's constant movement. It's constant pressure, constant contraction of your muscles, but not necessarily consistent high output. The next is a lack of sustained work at the high intensity, which is pretty much the same thing that we mentioned. And a very interesting note he posits is the high volume of isometric muscle contractions may be a limiting factor on conditioning improvements as well. And two of probably the more interesting points on the list is the effect of gravity. Gravity having a limiting effect on cardiovascular improvements for jiu-jitsu athletes. Basically saying that because jiu-jitsu takes place when you're essentially lying down or in a supine position, this position limits the improvements. And then finally, jiu-jitsu practitioners often intentionally employ energy conserving tactics because you don't want to gas out during a round. So you're not going to redline yourself. You're going to employ technique and strategies to slow down your opponent. Now, I'm going to read you a quote directly from the research paper itself. It states, because subjects with a VO2 max in the range of BJJ athletes appear mainly limited by oxygen supply, aerobic conditioning should focus on improvements in oxygen transport. Considering the apparent ceiling effect of BJJ on aerobic adaptations, opting for BJJ-based interval training at the cost of more appropriately designed modalities is a suboptimal aerobic conditioning strategy. Now, my interpretation or my translation of that quote is doing more BJJ will not make you fitter for BJJ. It's suboptimal. Now, I've been throwing around this term jiu-jitsu gas tank throughout this episode. What does it mean? I define jiu-jitsu gas tank as your ability to sustain a high level of output during sparring. That's it. Specifically for jiu-jitsu. I'm not talking about your fitness. I'm not talking about your VO2 max. I'm talking about your ability to actually train jiu-jitsu at a high intensity. Jiu-jitsu gas tank has three components. First is your technique efficiency. Second, your movement efficiency. And lastly, your cardiovascular fitness. If you take a white belt with 2 months of experience versus a BJJ purple belt with 6 years of experience, which one of these athletes will have a higher level of technique efficiency? Of course, the purple belt in nearly every circumstance. And that's because they've had more time and experience performing the techniques. So their body is able to perform them at a high level of efficiency. Therefore, they have higher levels of energy conservation. This is what we mean by technique efficiency. How do you improve your technique efficiency? Well, you got to train more jiu-jitsu and improve your technique. When you say that rolling more won't make you fit for BJJ, this is true, but rolling more will make you more technically efficient for BJJ. And of course, when your technique efficiency improves, the efficacy, of course, will improve as well. Think back to when you first started training, your very, very first session. How completely gassed were you? Was it because you weren't fit? Or was it because maybe you weren't fit, but you were wasting so much energy in movements that weren't doing anything? This is technique efficiency. The second point is movement efficiency. Not to be confused with technique efficiency. Here we're talking about your ability to move your body through space. If you can't bend down and touch your toes, or you can't sit in a deep squat movement, good luck keeping your knees to your chest, and good luck trying to efficiently move your body through space in order to achieve technique efficiency. If you want flexibility, go do yoga. If you want mobility, then you need to unlock your range of motion and strengthen yourself throughout that entire range. You can't have one without the other, because then you'll just be a Gumby. I'm sure you've trained with someone that feels like they're a rubber kid. They have flexible joints. They can move in all these wacky positions, but they're a noodle. They're completely weak throughout the entire range. Versus, I bet you probably have trained with someone who is very flexible and absolutely jacked and is incredibly strong in those ranges. Which one was more difficult to deal with? Practical ways to improve your movement efficiency is to do mobility training. So this can be in the form of mobility drills and stretches, and incorporating specific mobility work into your strength and conditioning program. If you're not doing a strength and conditioning program, then you're definitely missing out on both strength and performance gains and a reduction in your injury risk on the mats. Now, I have some resources to give you here. Firstly, you can follow my 30-day Jiu-Jitsu mobility challenge. It's completely free on YouTube. It takes you through some mobility drills and stretches for 30 days. The sessions are about 10 to 15 minutes, and it will help a lot because it's designed specifically for grappling. Next, you can consider implementing some functional or mobility-focused movements that translate to grappling. An example of this could be a Cossack squat, a kettlebell bottoms-up press, Jefferson curl, rotational movements, anti-rotational movements, core stability, and the list goes on and on. If you implement these movements into your training program instead of your mirror muscle bodybuilder workout, you're going to see better translation on the mats. And then finally, do a dedicated warm-up and a dedicated cool-down before and after you train jiu-jitsu. This is a great way to get your mobility training in without having to spend hours monkeying around on the floor at home or do a full extra day at the gym. All it takes is 5 to 10 minutes before and after you train. You get your mobility work in, you prime your joints and warm your body up for training jiu-jitsu. So it's a win-win all around. Now, if you don't know where to start on a warm-up and cool-down, I've got you covered. You can download a free mobility guide that will take you through warm-up and cool-down before and after you train. Link is in the description of this episode. And lastly, we have your cardiovascular fitness. This is the third and final component of your jiu-jitsu gas tank. For some people, this will be the most significant. If you've been training for a little bit, you have decent mobility, decent flexibility, but you're still gassing out, cardiovascular fitness is letting you down. Now, I mentioned that there is a difference between performance and fitness, but that doesn't mean that fitness isn't an important component of performance. Now, if you've reached this point in the episode and you're still screaming at me, but the best way to improve my conditioning for jiu-jitsu is to roll more, then you haven't been listening close enough, because VO2 max improvements will not come from hard jiu-jitsu sparring. No, you don't need to train harder. No, you don't need to change gyms. No, you don't need to go with more challenging training partners. This is all a fallacy. What you need to do is do some form of conditioning training to improve your VO2 max and your muscular endurance. There are 3 strategies that I want you to utilize to improve your cardiovascular fitness for grappling. The first is doing aerobic base training. If VO2 max is the ceiling or the peak of your conditioning, then aerobic base is the floor. If we could raise the floor and the ceiling of your conditioning performance, you absolutely outwork everyone that you roll with. You'll never have to sit out from rolls again, and you'll have an unstoppable gas tank in competition. This is what we want. Aerobic base training comes in the form of zone 2 training. This means operating in your zone 2 heart rate zone. This is under 60 or 70% of your maximum heart rate. In order to achieve this, you need to know what your true maximum heart rate is, so you have to do a max heart rate test. But there's a way of cheating the system. You can utilize a method that I like to call the talking test. Basically, it means that if you were out for a run, for example, and you want to know if you're in your zone 2 heart rate zone, you should be able to hold a conversation on the phone with a friend, but they should be able to tell that you're running. You don't want to be so out of breath that you can't talk. You want to be able to easily hold a conversation, but still you're running. You're not walking at the end of the day. Another reason that zone 2 training is so effective is because it's far less taxing on your central nervous system and requires less recovery. Now, jiu-jitsu is a very high taxing sport, meaning that if you're training jiu-jitsu, it's taking a lot from your body. It requires a lot of recovery. Whereas zone 2 training is low intensity, but for longer duration. The adaptations for this are different from hard jiu-jitsu sparring. So we need less recovery time. So that is another added benefit for adding in zone 2 training. The next is VO2 max training. There are 1,000,001 ways to improve your VO2 max for grappling. My preferred method is the 4x4x4 interval method. Perform 4 4-minute rounds at 90% maximum effort, not to be confused with heart rate, and have 4 minutes of rest in between each round. I get so many questions about this protocol, so I'm going to clarify some of the common ones. Firstly, yes, it's 90% maximum sustainable effort, not heart rate. I don't want you tracking your heart rate. I want you going at 90% of your maximum sustainable effort. I'm not talking about an all-out sprint. I want you still being able to recover in the 4-minute period. The next question I get is people say that 4 minutes is too long. It's a waste of time and it's too easy. If 4 minutes is not enough for you, 2 things are happening here. Either you're not truly giving me 90% of your maximum effort, you're not training hard enough, or you are incredibly fit, you have a very, very high VO2 max, and you're an athletic specimen. I know which one my money's on. So you need to be pushing harder in your intervals. Now, once you've done this for a little while and it still is too easy, you can increase the 4-minute on interval to 5 minutes. And then eventually you can reduce the 4-minute rest to 3 minutes. So increase to 5, reduce to 3. If you do 5x3s and you can still do it easily, then add an additional round in. And then just keep working and periodizing your training up until you've found your sticking point or what works best for you. If you get to the point where you're doing 5-minute rounds with 3 minutes of rest in between, you're an absolute athletic specimen. I personally have not built my VO2 max to that level yet. And I've been doing this protocol for a long time. So if you can do that efficiently and you're truly operating at 90% max effort, then you're fitter than I am. Another protocol that I want to give you is doing slightly different HIIT protocol. So if you're training in the gym and you're doing a strength and power session, at the end of your session, you can include some interval training. Now, this can be in the form of Tabata sets, or you can do a 30 seconds on, 15 seconds off, or even 45 seconds on, 15 seconds off. For here, we're not doing 90%, we're doing 100% of your sprint effort. So what it would look like is something like maybe 45 seconds on the assault bike, 15 seconds rest. Repeat that for 4 to anywhere up from 10 rounds. It's not going to be as effective as the 4x4x4, but you're going to get slightly different sprinting adaptations with that protocol. And finally, we have work capacity. Here we're talking about performing sustained efforts of medium intensity. So think about muscle endurance exercise. An awesome protocol for this could be something like a sled push at your body weight, up and down for 5 minutes. So load up a sled with your body weight and just keep pushing it up and down a track for 5 minutes straight. Or you can try this protocol that I learned from Phil DeRoot. It's taking 2 antagonist exercises and performing 1 rep of each of the exercise back to back, back and forward for 1 minute, and then having a 30-second rest in between by doing some corrective exercises. So practically speaking, it could look like something like doing a trap bar deadlift, 1 rep at 60 to 70% of your 1RM, and then doing a overhead push press, 1 rep, 60 to 70% of your 1RM, and then going back and forth for those for a full 1 minute, maintaining your form, moving the weight explosively. And then in between that 1 minute, you're going to do 30 seconds of a corrective exercise. It could be something like weighted YWTs. It could be modified Superman, some resistance band work on your shoulders, whatever you need to be focusing on. Do that whole protocol for 5 rounds through and try and keep your heart rate at around 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. If your heart rate spikes above 70%, then reduce your intensity or cut the exercise completely. Do a few rounds of that, and it's an awesome work capacity training protocol. Another thing you can do is circuit training. Circuit training has been recommended in the research on grappling specific conditioning, and you can do a modified circuit. You can do Jiu-Jitsu specific circuit training at your gym. So it could look like something like doing a blast passing drill for 30 seconds, then moving on to kettlebell swings, then moving on to takedowns, moving on to shoots or sprawls or something like that. Setting up around 5 to 10 exercises in a circuit, moving from one to the next, doing about 30 seconds of each, running that through, or you can set a rep limit on each station and running that through for about 15 minutes to 20 minutes. And that's a super effective work capacity circuit for Jiu-Jitsu specifically. If you're trying to do it in the weights room, then include explosive ballistic training. So we're looking at plyometrics like broad jumps or knees to feet vertical jump. An easy way to formulate a circuit is using the Lucky Sevens model. Pick 7 exercises, do 7 reps of each exercise 7 times through. Super easy to remember, 7 by 7 by 7. And that's how you set up a very simple circuit. In terms of how often to do each protocol, here's what I recommend. I'm going to assume that you're training Jiu-Jitsu around 3 to 4 times per week and you're doing 2 strength sessions in the gym. I recommend adding 2 dedicated conditioning sessions per week or incorporating them into your strength sessions. The way to do this is have 1 dedicated VO2 max session per week, non-negotiable, it doesn't change. do the 4x4x4 method. Try and have it on a day where you have at least 12 hours between your VO2 max session and your lifting or your jiu-jitsu. The other session, it can be alternating between your zone 2 training and your work capacity training. For zone 2, I recommend going for a jog, maybe jumping on the stationary bike, assault bike, whatever cardio modality you prefer, a low sustained effort for around 30 to 60 minutes in duration. If you're very fit, you can go up to 90 minutes. For here, we're keeping our heart rate below 70%, or you can do the talking test like I mentioned. For work capacity, you have the option of doing something like a sled push combined with a farmer's carry for 5 to 10 minutes sustained effort duration or longer. You can do the circuit training with the Lucky 7x7, or you can do the sustained effort work in the antagonist alternating exercise modality, like I mentioned that I got from Phil DeRue. So those are some options there. If you enjoyed this slightly different style, this different format of the BJJ Strong podcast, let me know by subscribing to the channel and liking the video. If you're watching on YouTube, drop me a comment what topic or what episode you want to see coming up next. And if you're on Spotify, chuck me a follow and share this with your friends. It really help to grow the podcast and keep these episodes coming. Thanks for watching.